Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Now, a few months ago, the team behind Newsroom started what has now become known as the so-called Dagga debate, asking the question, should marijuana be legalized here in South Africa? We were approached firstly by the concerned youth of Southern Africa who wanted to go head-to-head with marijuana lobby group Below the Line. And what followed was a debate that spread like wildfire on all social media sites, went global really. Since then, we've been approached by numerous lobby groups, concerned doctors and experts who all wanted to have their say on the matter. After having them all on the show, we've decided it was now time for it to take a political turn and invite some of our country's most influential political parties to come and have their say. Now, this week, they'll be joining us one by one every day of the week to have their say. Starting today with Jeremy Acton, the leader of the Dagga Party of South Africa. We thought it would only be apt to start with the Dagga Party. Good morning, Jeremy. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Eben. Thank you.
Jeremy, tell us about your engagement as the Dagga Party, firstly, with other political parties and how they've responded to this question.
Well, one of our members who's actually been on your show before, Mr. William Wallace from Below the Line, who's a supporter of the party, wrote to Mrs. Ziller to inquire about the DA standpoint on Dagga and gave motivations for legalization and asked for a public reply. And we got a deafening silence. So the Dagga culture of South Africa is wondering what the DA position is. And then Mr. Mark Wiley, community safety spokesman for the DA in the Western Cape, recently has been taken to court by a Rastafarian grouping for equating Dagga use with criminals and especially linking the Rastafarian community with criminal behavior.
So that's a case that's pending. So the engagement with some of the political parties have not been good. In this case, you say that the DA, who are often seen to be taking issues or taking a stand on issues, they have no position on this. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. And if I may go on to the ANC, well, it's well written down in the history and research that the struggle movement used cannabis cultivation in the homelands to fund the struggle. And they used friendly white persons who would transport the cannabis to the urban centres of South Africa to raise the money. But it's very strange that the ANC then, as the struggle movement suddenly turned around on its own growers when it came into power and used the same apartheid helicopters, police and dogs against those people who had supported them in the deep homelands. So the ANC's position on cannabis is very clear over the last 14, 15 years.
Let's talk about the country. Is South Africa ready to legalize marijuana? Is Parliament ready to take this step?
Well, firstly, I think a state mechanism like Parliament, which has presided over the prohibition for literally the last 100 years, is not necessarily the most competent organization to write legislation on Dagga. It should come from the Dagga culture and from public consultation. I also think that the government is going to be very unwilling to legalize, because our government is controlled behind the scenes by various corporations and money elites who don't want to see cannabis legal. The reason why it is kept illegal is not because it's a dangerous drug that we must be protected from by means of criminalization, which is a harm in itself. Cannabis is actually an industrial and medical resource. Cannabis provides the most nutritious protein seed on earth, a very useful seed oil. It provides the longest and strongest fiber on earth from a plant. All the sails of the British Navy were made from cannabis. And then once we have extracted the fibers from the stalks of the plant, we're left with a thing called herds, which is like a cellulose material. And we can make petrol and methanol and methane, in other words, energy, from the waste products that come from the inside of the sticks of Dagga. And that is one of the most important reasons why Dagga was originally made illegal by those corporations that were behind the British Crown in South Africa and also the American federal government in the 1930s.
What about public sentiment?
We could actually...
What about public sentiment? Where are we now with public sentiment, and what do you think? Is it not maybe time for something like a referendum to be put forward and for the people of South Africa to decide on this matter?
Well, I'm a bit concerned that a referendum would be held along party political lines, and those parties that don't support Dagga will require their members to vote against such an issue. But remember, we are a cultural minority. The Dagga culture is a very organized and legitimate cultural minority, and we're claiming our rights, regardless of whether the rest of South Africa accepts it or not. I think that we have to legalize Dagga. It's not a matter of whether we should or we shouldn't. Firstly, recognizing that the propaganda against this plant is there for the vested interests. If we look at the future of our economy, we have a massive unemployment issue. 50% of South Africans go to bed hungry. And we have this resource which will enable us all to participate equitably in a production economy. And when I also say production, instead of just being a consumer, South Africans could be growing petrol. We could reduce the price of petrol in South Africa. We could reduce crimes related to poverty. In countries which have legalized for various reasons, recreational and medical, they noticed that the suicide rate came down. So did traffic accidents. So did domestic and violence and violent crimes. We need those statistics in South Africa. So we have to actually consider that it's not about believing that it's going to be dangerous to our future. It's actually going to be a very big help for a more sustainable South Africa.
Jeremy, finally, we have all the political parties coming in the rest of the week. Now, you say that they've been silent and they've been very difficult for you to interact with them. What are the questions that you want to ask these political parties? We've got the DA confirmed for Wednesday. Do you have a specific question to ask them?
They must provide information about why they think it is illegal, and then they must also explain why we can't use this resource for the various industrial benefits which will accrue to our economy. It would have a massive multiplier effect on the economic situation in South Africa, and legalizing cannabis in the Karoo areas would mean that we don't actually have to frack the Karoo for natural gas. Our farmers could farm gas. As regards the ANC, I just hope that they would hear the pleas of their own voters who use cannabis. This is something that is going to be of great help to South Africa, and on the medical side as well, we should be seeing it in all hospitals for all the ailments that cannabis can treat. And then on the other hand, all citizens should be equitably allowed to participate in a cannabis economy. And equitable production of cannabis means equitable access to land in South Africa, which is something that the political parties make a lot of hot air about. But I don't see the change when it comes to land access. We're sitting in ghettos with prohibition. Well, let's rather move young South Africans out into the rural areas and give them this resource to create a future.
Jeremy Acton of the Dagga Party of South Africa, thank you for joining us today. This as we continue our Dagga debates. It's been going on now on this very show since the middle of July. This week we're going to be entertaining the views of all the political parties in South Africa. We have the IFP confirmed for tomorrow, and thereafter that will be followed by the DA on Wednesday and so forth for the rest of the week. So if you have any questions, if you have any views, please send them to us at SABC Newsroom. That's where we want you to interact with us, at SABC Newsroom on Twitter. Of course, the site where we live is SABC News. There you see it, .co.za/news That's where you can get all the latest updates from all around the world.